Good evening. I'm Sarah Whiting. I'm the Dean of the School of Architecture at Rice, and I'm pleased to welcome you tonight to the 2011 Sally Walsh Lecture. The Sally Walsh Lecture Series is supported by an endowed fund of the Architecture Center Houston Foundation and is coordinated by the Rice Design Alliance and the Rice School of Architecture. Particular thanks for making this annual lecture possible go to Raymond and Susan Brockstein, who are close to and learn much from Sally Walsh. Sally Walsh was a Houston designer with a renowned eye. According to her bio, she was born in Inspiration, Arizona. Not by her own doing, of course, but what a great beginning. Her ambition upon going to Augustana College in Sioux Falls was to, quote, marry a farmer and raise 5 children. Interest displayed by farmers, she notes wryly in her own bio, was 0. So she upped and moved to Chicago, got a job with Knoll, first as an office typist, then working her way up the ladder until she worked directly with Hans Knoll directly. Oops, sorry, I think I'm touching here. There you go. In Houston, Walsh had her own firm where she designed everything from bank interiors to jet plane interiors, bringing modern design to the city. So that's a pretty inspirational story in itself. So I can't think of a better person to honor Sally Walsh's memory and talents than Petra Blaisse. Petra began her career in the Department of Applied Arts at the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam. In 1991, she founded the design office Inside Outside. An interior and landscape designer, Petra works with light, textiles, finishes, sounds, colors, and plants to design walls, floors, ceilings, landscapes, entire environments. She's collaborated with many of the architects who have lectured here recently, designing the acoustic walls and curtains for UN Studios' Mercedes-Benz Museum in Stuttgart, the courtyard landscapes for the Arm & Hammer Museum in Los Angeles with Michael Maltzin, the curtains for Milstein Hall at Cornell by OMA, among many, many other collaborations. When Ron and I were working at OMA in the early 90s, Petra was designing the museum park adjacent to the Kunsthal in Rotterdam, and also the curtains, floors, acoustic walls, and furniture for the Lille Grand Palais, the convention center, among other projects. Petra would swoop into the office, always elegant, always stylishly dressed, bringing along with her designs that were always unexpected, unique, and beautiful. And then she'd leave, going back to her office in Amsterdam. We all admired her, but we were also all supremely jealous. Her combination of interiors and landscapes, for one, she got to leave the office. Her combination of interiors and landscapes is sort of obvious. I mean, shouldn't they always be combined? Isn't that a kind of obvious career move? But it's a brilliant original move. Her joining of the two is a way of working with material ingredients at the very finest of grains. Weaves, textures, and pixels of colors. She creates some immaterial effects, atmospheres of sheer pleasure that have no scale. Petra has titled tonight's talk Shifting Position. In linguistic theory, the shifter is an important concept. Russian linguist Roman Jakobson used it to refer to those elements in language whose meaning can't be defined without context. For example, the pronouns I and you, as well as words like here and now, or as my students know, my particular pet peeve, which is the word this. All of these words can only be understood by reference to the context in which they're uttered. Shifters, Jakobson concluded, are indexical symbols. This linguistic combination of context and effect is the perfect explanation of Petra's world. I'd like to welcome Petra, who's here tonight, to bring us into her world of design shifters, but before I let her come to the stage, I want to make a small announcement, which is that you will be doing a book signing right after the lecture for the book, the monograph Inside Outside, which will be right outside the lecture hall. So you can pick up your copy and have Petra sign it right after the lecture. Welcome to Houston.
Can somebody switch off the lights? Thank you for welcoming me, so complimenting Sarah. I always feel like an elephant in the porcelain, this is what we say in Dutch, in the porcelain cupboard. So it's always very nice if you are described differently. Thank you for being here. I feel very welcomed and honored to be here. The lecture is as follows. I wrote a text, and I'm going to read the text, and in between I'm going to go into certain, explain a few projects. If you think it's too quick, or too slow, or too long, or too boring, please, interact. I'm not into computers so much, but this interaction I really like. So, ladies and gentlemen, it all started when, after studying art and design and working at the Museum of Modern Art in Amsterdam, as Sarah was saying, for many years, I started working as independent exhibition interior and garden designer from 1987 onward, under the name of Inside Outside Petra Blaisse. Working from home, on site and at improvised desks in the offices of the architects and art institutions I worked with archives and tools stored in the trunk of my old second-hand car for 11 years, I was lucky to find 2 empty, spacious classrooms for rent in an old school building in Amsterdam in December of 1998. Here I could finally settle and invite people to join me in my adventures. Since then, Inside Outside has developed into a professional team of diverse disciplines, now consisting of about 10 to 12 people. An interior and graphic designer alias cultural anthropologist, an interior architect and potter with a talent for economics and contract management, a fashion and costume designer alias gardener, 2 architects and skilled model makers with a love for music and the art of cooking, and 2 architects that perform Latin drum and Spanish dance in their free time. 4 landscape architects that also teach, write, practice the fencing sport or run families. A theater historian that takes care of our public relations, and an office manager that supports us in financial matters and that, with the help of all of us, prepares warm lunches for us every single working day, which in Holland is very special, because we usually eat bread with cheese or something, which is not very romantic if you have that every day. As far as religious and cultural backgrounds is concerned, our team includes Christian, atheist, Jewish, Muslim, and Buddhist beliefs, while uniting North and Southern Europe, North and South America, the Far and the Middle East. Thus, the inside-outside team seems symbol for what our work is about. A perpetual search for new answers and solutions to often complex, demanding issues in the fields of interior and landscape architecture, practiced in many countries in service of many different clients and cultures. So this is a mishmash of different projects, inside and outside, sometimes really executed, sometimes temporary. This was, for instance, an art commission for the Villa Manin Gardens in Italy during the Art Biennale in Venice by Francesco Bonami. He was the curator, and he asked 9 artists, and us, we were one of them, to my surprise, because we don't consider ourselves as artists, to design a pavilion for the gardens of the Villa Manin. And we said, well, we're not artists and we're also not architects, so what shall we do? And so we developed a sun-shading personal pavilion that people could carry around. We produced it in our office, in our studio. We made 57 or something of these parasols, and it symbolizes actually our work. It's a translucent but reflective material. In certain conditions you can look through, but in others it reflects its surrounding. We made holes in it so that you have organized views, and you can, of course, walk around with it, so it's flexible, and you can fold it, and you can play with it, and you can borrow it and put it back. And it has, of course, a lifespan, not forever. And in the landscape we added some stainless steel drops, as I call them, so that in the darkest spots you knew where to go and where to walk. And this also created a 4th dimension in the landscape. And so sometimes we are asked to do a site-specific installation, and then with little, interventions we can have sometimes influential effect. We're also working in London on a bank curtain. Inside Outside is a design firm that addresses both the interior and exterior space, accepting commissions of small to very large scale, both within the Netherlands and internationally. We focus on the interaction with architecture and the intent of the architect, on sharing the initial speculative moments of a project and taking part in its development from beginning to end. Our work continuously anticipates various aspects of a project, from meaning to use, cultural or social expectations, and the economic and political context in which a project evolves. Therefore, our work runs parallel with the architectural process and takes between 6 months and 6 years, Sarah, 6 years to complete. Because the jealousy is, of course, also about the time span, right? Architecture is like a dinosaur. We also take part, of course, in discussions and advise certain groups and look for local architects to collaborate with us on certain projects. Our work is about the experience of space itself and exploring the connection between interior and exterior space. This is nothing new, of course, in modern architecture. We introduce movement through texture, light, sound, climate, color, and the orchestration of trajectories. We manipulate floors, walls, ceilings, facades, and furniture, and we create surroundings with inserted objects, layers or plantings that trigger movement or move through space and time themselves. Both inside and out, we like to manipulate the experience of boundary and to create environments that are flexible, adaptable, and at times temporary. This provisional quality is what the public responds to and what we try to defend. Therefore, the end result tends to be soft or suggest softness, to transmit or filter light, create shade or introduce darkness, to influence the acoustics of the viewer's perception of a space and its boundaries, responding to every change of context, private or public, and to take environmental issues into consideration wherever possible. Here we have it again. I'm sorry. Sometimes I repeat myself. In the end, our projects link, widen, limit, open up, divide, or multiply space, enriching it with a multitude of physical effects. I'm going back to this because I want to tell you something about it. Why gardens and curtains? Because they have something in common, I think. Both are defined by the elements, climate, time, growth, and finiteness. Both depend on the human touch, on the interaction with the human, and both cannot be completely controlled. And that is precisely what we like. How this very unpredictability impacts the stable and often monotonous structures of our urbanized environment. How it counteracts the speed and money-driven development strategies of today. I like this project because this was also a site-specific installation in Madrid last year. We were asked by a curator to do an exhibition, and we said, well, it's really hard to show our work in an exhibition. We have movies. There's a filmer called Frans Bartesius, a Dutch designer, who's a photographer and filmer as well. And he's filming our work since 2000, since our exhibition at the Storefront Gallery of Art and Architecture in New York. And that is really fantastic because filming our curtains, for instance, is really what it's all about. You can never show it in a photograph or as a piece of cloth hanging in an exhibition. So we said, can we also make a site-specific installation? And she found us this institution. It's called La Casa Encendida in Madrid. And I was telling my fantastic guides this morning, it's a fantastic institution because it's a cultural institution, but also educational and social. They help people find jobs. They have studios for artists and people who can't afford, sound studios and film studios and they have libraries, study rooms, they have educational programs for landscape and gardening, etc., etc. And also for mentally handicapped, they have programs, they give concerts, and I'm sure in Houston you know all these things. It's a very active institution, and I think you probably have such institutions as well. But we really thought it was great to be there and not in a gallery or something that's specific about art or something like that, or architecture. And when I was teaching there or working with students in Madrid, I heard, and also from journalists that interviewed me, that everyone living in Madrid thought Madrid was terribly barren and had no green at all, and was really a city in the desert. And of course it is very dry there, but we found out that actually Madrid, I was very surprised, we found out that Madrid is one of the major places for the migration of birds. And I just heard today that Houston also is, and I heard yesterday that Minneapolis also is. So these birds really fly incredible distances, as we all know. So the birds are landing there and finding something there, which has to be green. I mean, maybe it doesn't have the color green, but it's green enough for birds to rest and to eat and to do something. So we decided to take the bird as a metaphor of the neutral viewer, the one who sees, the one who has no boundaries, who has no discrimination, who is just visiting and looking, and decides that Madrid has something to offer. And in that way we have made an installation that started outside. You see this as the facade. These are all shadings, so sunscreens. And sometimes the bird is cut out, and sometimes it's put on top. So when you are inside and you are studying or doing something, the sun is moving, of course, position, as you all know, and therefore when you are sitting somewhere, all of a sudden this bird would slide by, and you would think, hey, maybe Madrid has a bird, or birds. And there was a carpet. We made a very narrow carpet starting at the entrance. I'm sorry I didn't have pictures of it today. And the carpet moves through the entire building up to the roof and introduces you to the fantastic roof garden. And the whole carpet is a story about the birds and all the natural conditions in and around Madrid. Alas, it was an installation of only 4 weeks, but it was very fantastic to do. And my entire team, architect or non-architect, was into birds. And the whole studio was full of birds. And we know more about birds and birds' nests than ever before. So our work takes us in many directions. The curtain, in its traditional role, had an enormous responsibility, identifying private space and protecting the human from natural forces. It became a tool to prevent cold light and the human gaze to enter the built interior space. In Western society, these performances have gradually been taken over by electricity and other technologies. The curtain could emancipate, as I call it, shed former utilitarian duties and discover new roles and new conditions. I dare to state that Inside Outside has helped the curtain to emancipate from its traditional responsibilities, to discover entirely new roles. One important tool to achieve this is the form of the track. The track, like the path in our gardens, choreographs movement and thus leads the curtain in, out, and through space, changing its appearance and effect with the speed with which it moves and detaching it from the architectural form itself. The curtain thus becomes a personality of its own, invading, inhabiting, and deserting a space, opening it up, dividing or multiplying it. A curtain can be silent, restrained, noisy, elegant, overwhelming, blunt, or breakable, but it can at any given time diminish or expand its volume, undulate or stretch, fold, pleat, roll or shift, flutter or wallop, reflect, absorb, or radiate, thus forever changing the acoustic, visual, and mental atmosphere of a space in its passing. I would like to tell about this project. It is the Haus der Kunst in München, a building, very classicistic architecture. I'm sure you know much more about this than I do, but it's been built in the 30s by Troost, and it was really in the time that Hitler was powerful, and he used this building. It was an art collection building, or building showing art, and he speeched there many times. And the building used to be, or is still partly, full of symbols and decorations of that time. But through time, of course, Germany was very aware of its role and took away a lot of these decorations. So, for instance, here in the roof you see the swastikas, and now if you go there, half of the swastika has been taken away, and now it's a very innocent decoration. And the director, he now left for the Tate, but Chris Derkon, he asked me to make curtains in the main central hall, where the museum, actually to the left and to the right, the plan of the museum is identical. Of course, everything has a rhythm of mathematic scale and volume and so on. But the central hall, they wanted to use for special events and maybe rent out for some income, but also for speeches and dinners and so on. And so the director asked us to make curtains and to improve the acoustics, to hang curtains behind these columns on two sides and see what we could do on the short sides. And as usual, we were not very obedient. And we tried to first analyze what actually was going on. And we noticed that there are corridors on the outer sides of the columns, corridors leading to the exhibition spaces. And the flow coming from the entrance of the building here in a hall with reception or a ticket office. And then you would also always go in here to go to the exhibition spaces on both sides. So we were looking at what can we do also to not only comply to all the technical demands, so acoustic, envelopment, intimacy, light. Maybe we can also have influence on the light, and maybe because the Haus der Kunst shows a lot of film and video art, we can also give it an extra function that the museum had not thought about. So actually we did something really simple. We shifted its position. And by shifting its position, we brought the whole classicistic architecture out of balance, as you can see. And actually it's a very, very simple curtain. That was also one of the requests of all the curators. Please make a curtain gray and completely neutral, because you cannot disturb the art. And I'm always a bit sarcastic about not disturbing the art, because of course art should be very strong enough to be able to handle these kind of things. And if you think of the past, many times curtains were a backdrop for paintings. But anyway, we had half a year. We needed to convince the team of the museum to not make it gray, but slightly bluish. Slightly blue. And that's what we did. And it became also a projection screen. So this side of the curtain is made of projection screen, and it's lined with a very heavy velvet with a top that is translucent, so the light comes through the top. And on the right-hand side, you see it behind the columns, very much pleated in the classic way, actually. And so the acoustic effect is good, and you can completely handle it manually. It's 500 kilos, but two men or women can shift it from one position to the other and use different compositions. And of course, if you don't want it at all, you store it. And if you store it like in the Kunsthal that we designed also the curtain in 1992, I think, you make it into a kind of sculpture in the corner of the space. You can also use the curtain as a plane onto which you communicate, from which you communicate information. So the floor plan of the museum is onto its lining, and the lower hem is full of holes for the air conditioning and airflow. And of course, as the fire people, we are always worried about everyone's safety, and rightly so. Yeah, in the synagogue in Amsterdam, we made curtains also, well, full of holes and information. Actually, a building by Search architects from Amsterdam, they made a shul with 2 facades made of glass, one facade to the west, one facade to the east. And we were asked after the fact, so not following the entire process, but actually when the whole design was finished, to make the curtains as a kind of sun shading, but also for the safety and privacy of the visitors to this space, and also to not distract people from what was going on. So there were many messages given to us. And we thought of very light blue and making holes and making an image of the old, very stable, wise old tree on one side, symbolizing the older generation who gives knowledge and experience to the next generation, and the other side, very young twigs, and the ones who have to carry tradition and knowledge and belief into the future. Over time, we have come to realize that some of the spatial qualities that were introduced in architecture in the 80s and 90s, like frozen fluidity, mutability, and changeability, have been part of the history of textiles for centuries. And that the qualities that architects, thanks to the use of increasingly sophisticated software and programming, are realizing with incredible effort, can be realized without the aid of a computer and with a fraction of the time and effort with textiles. A key discovery for Inside Outside in the past decade or so has been the treatment of the curtain not in space, but the curtain itself as space. Where at first we saw the curtain as a flexible and soft plane imbued with certain properties, acoustic, psychological, aesthetic, etc., we became more and more interested in the tectonic qualities and the volume of the curtain, the cloth itself. This was also for the Mercedes-Benz Museum, an acoustic wall. The wall was 40 meters long and 3 meters high. It surrounded a cafe designed by concrete, I think, designers from the Netherlands. And we used brush. I had a real urge to use brushes. I don't know why. I had it already when we worked on the embassy in Berlin, to make a wall of brushes and work with the brush industry from Germany. And the background is golden metal foil, and the brushes are simply implemented onto it. But making a wall out of it, it scatters the sound waves. So it has a much better, it doesn't really absorb, of course, but it scatters it. And in the meantime, it suggests space where actually there isn't any. And of course, for Prada in New York, we made VIP dressing rooms curtains, as they are called. And by pleating them exaggeratingly, you create a kind of air tubes that mute the sound, and then lined with plastic, people have real privacy in these changing rooms. We also made a knitted sock for Prada at the time in 2001. My God. Yes, in 2001. I knitted it in the Gramercy Park Hotel with my assistant Anki. We had cloth ordered from Germany, a very thin voile, very silver-colored voile, because we wanted to mimic the hanging cupboards that OMA architects designed. They were hanging from trucks, and they were supposed to, and they change position all the time. So in the evening, you can bundle all these cupboards together, and they are closed volume. During the day, they shift, and they are open, exhibitions of the clothes and whatever they sell. And one of them always had to be textile. So we knitted in a way that it looked like expanded metal, but then very soft. And so lots of silver voile came to the Gramercy Park, and we carried it up, and we knitted for 7 days. And we started on each other's lap, because we had to knit like a sock. So we went knitting and going further and further apart. It was psychologically really interesting. And to knit, of course, you have to tear the cloth, etc. But it was interesting to do, and then after 6 days we threw it out of the window and put it into a taxi and then hang it. And our tool was we made it ourselves. It's a garden hose and a wooden stick. And we got it through customs, and it was really December 2001. And here's the sock. Shifting position. Well, I can tell so many stories. I think it would take too much time. This is for the Casa da Musica. We made finishes of the wall. 11 curtains for the concert halls, large concert hall, small concert hall. Searching really for solutions. A concert hall with huge windows on both sides, 22 by 7 by 15 meters high. And, it had to be darkening, acoustically absorbent, view filtering, and sun reflecting. So it's 3-4 layers for each side. And the view filter we wanted to knit. And because I was thinking of, in Portugal, it's a very Catholic culture. And my mother always wore, I was brought up Catholic, my mother always wore, we lived in Portugal when I was small, these lace cloth over her hair when we went to church. Married women black lace and unmarried women white lace. So I wanted to refer to this culture. And we did many knitting tests, as you can see. But it never was stable enough. And so we went into the fishing industry of the Netherlands and found this fishing net and started to knot. So from knit it became knot. And this all goes with engineers, with construction engineers and sound engineers, because the weight of such an enormous curtain has influence on the entire roof structure and the building itself, and the motor systems, etc. It was knotted in Germany by a company called Geritz, and of course we do tests on site with the architects to see what scale these knots, how open and how large and how thick the cloth could be. And 17 women and men knotted 700 hours. And we registered it through computer. Thank God there are computers in that case. And to see how they knotted, because of course each person knots or knits in a different manner. So we had to have some control of the consistency of the knotting. Here you see it's a whole structure of aluminum and stainless steel rods that pull it up really silently. So in the middle of a concert it can be pulled up. Here you see it going, and it disappears into the ceiling, and silently a door closes and it's gone. One side black, one side white, behind the concert, behind the orchestra and behind the public. Endlessly. And of course the gold referring to also maybe a bit the Catholic Church. Mercedes-Benz, three-dimensional, working at the Chase Museum now with Machado and Silvetti on a very structural curtain for the entrance lobby. Making, of course, drawings for the tender. We have to tender all our curtains like architecture. Like architecture, Sarah. Make tender documents.
It's still hard. It's still hard to watch.
If you design within a certain context, you have to know your host and where you are. The getting to know is not only about the place and the people who work in it, but also about the wishes of the future users. The first process is always to go through all layers of information: culture, site, climate, use, inhabitants, and of course the local flora and fauna. I think that the most exciting part of our work is this kind of anthropology, sociology, the spontaneous moments before you become a designer, as it were, before you have a plan. You are a human injected somewhere, expected to create something there and then. And then each person you start working with implies a certain color palette, certain energies, preferences, or wants. The use of colors is a sensitive matter. In my country, Holland, we are used to strong primary colors like white, black, blue, yellow, green, or orange. In other cultures, these same colors might trigger emotions of resentment, shock, awe, or even fear. For instance, in Europe, we interpret white as a sign of purity, as in a Christian wedding, for instance. But in Korea, white symbolizes death, even when it is in the form of a white blooming tree. In Taipei, this is in Taipei, we work on the interiors and landscape of the Taipei Performing Arts Center. The colors that we initially imagined for the interior of the auditoriums were rejected instantly by the local architects because they referred to specific political parties, the military, or the Chinese culture of the mainland. So color can be banned for political or religious reasons, because they represent the wrong parties or death. They can be forbidden because their pigment base is considered environmentally harmful, or simply because fashion predictors and production companies decide that it is time for a change. If you look around, the colors that one saw everywhere in the 50s and 60s, the colors of Technicolor, for instance, don't exist any longer. They literally disappeared from our general color spectrum and are simply no longer produced. Now, Seattle Library is, of course, always a good example where color played an enormous role in our function there. We were asked to do landscape and interior finishes, and we made one curtain for the auditorium. And this was really such a project where we started with the architects from the beginning and made these kind of color scopes per space, from the beginning. And then started to get a very strong concept of starting the landscape outside and pulling it inwards and making them literally into carpets. And this was not only for acoustic reasons, but also for wayfinding reasons, because a carpet, of course, identifies a place and also invites people to sit down and read, for instance, or you know that you have to go somewhere or walk past it, etc. These are all photographs I make of plants, or my team by now also makes of plants and structures, and that with certain technologies you can implement in carpets, project carpets that are really for tough and rough use. Public library is used really in a very rough manner. Acoustic and reflective sides of a curtain. This is also an interesting story about color. If you get tired, please tell me. Is it okay? Because I also have to talk about landscapes, you can imagine. We also worked sometimes on restoration projects, especially in England, with an architect called Tim Ronalds twice. This was for the Hackney Empire Theatre in Hackney in London, very multicultural area. And it's a building by Matcham of 1905, I think, or maybe 1895, I'm not sure anymore. And they wanted to restore it after years and years of use by all kinds of cultures and for all kinds of reasons. Bingo evenings to children's things. It's really a machine of performance. It was a very interesting discussion. What is restoration? Do you go to its real original state of 1895 when Matcham made it all beige, gold and dark brown? Or do you respect all the layers of cultural and fashionable differences and see that as a state, as a status of a certain moment. I think that's a very difficult discussion. What we introduced was to say, okay, maybe you can respect all these layers because it makes the theater really interesting, and so keep the cacophony of color. And we could introduce, we were asked to do all the textiles there, a colorless textile. By doing colorless textile, black and white, and also a certain scale that would not have been imagined by matching, you introduce maybe a new layer, some kind of, you know, something about the future or something different. And the architect liked it a lot, but the owners and the Crafts Council and the Lottery Fund and all these commissions were very, very doubtful. And they took a year to think about it. By the way, this curtain is a guillotine curtain, so it only goes up and down. And so we wanted it to have a very three-dimensional effect and built it up of fringes so that with each movement it would have an incredible movement in itself, like a kind of waterfall. After a year of thinking, the commission came back to us and said, Ms. Blaisse, we know you are very modern and a very good designer, but we cannot accept your proposal. Our public will be surprised and will not come back. They really want to come into the Hackney Empire and know that they get what they always had, really traditional. We want a red velvet curtain with gold, but you can give back the commission, we don't mind, we understand. And of course I thought, well, maybe it's very interesting for me to not be modern or original at all. No, really, and to make it into something much more exciting than to be free, you know, just be the prisoner of the expectation. And so I thought, wow, red velvet. And I had a dream, which is really true. Sometimes it goes like that. I had a dream about a girl who was jumping, sort of dancing, jumping, and she had a dress with a smocked top. I learned how to smock when I was young at school. And I'm not sure it's the English word, smocking. And while she was jumping and breathing, the smoke went in and out. And it was really fascinating. So we made a smock, old-fashioned smock in small, and then we started to enlarge it and to create a very three-dimensional, different kind of red velvet curtain. And of course, we hung it, and the people, the technicians said, all right then, so how am I going to clean this thing? I mean, it's going to have some dust, won't it? I said, dust is going to settle, and then you take a big thing, you know, those things that you have with carpets, and you just hit it. Or hit it. And they say, oh, what? We'll hit it. Which they do, and it works. So that was that. About color. Given programs and the expected deliverables for our interventions are as complex by now as they are for build volumes. Apart from acoustic absorption, separation, or reflection, according to a meticulously detailed program, our curtains are expected to meet measurable requirements like sun reflection, temperature reduction, glare controlling, let me turn the page, view filtering, darkening, shading, wind reduction, climatic protection or isolation, etc. They need to be fire resistant, color fast, long-lasting, easy to handle, and they have to meet site-specific maintenance expectations. They need to offer a guarantee, sometimes of 25 years, completely impossible. Their weight requires specific constructions in roofs, their trajectory impacts the design of the ceilings, the floor plan, the pattern of the transparent facades. and their storage volume influences the size and positioning of walls. This was with Sana Architects for the Glass Pavilion in Toledo, Ohio, and we worked 2.5 years with the architects and all the engineers to measure each detail of our interventions with curtains, and ended up doing the most neutral, undesigned. It was all about folds, transparency, and stitching. And even this kind of decoration was received with doubt. In the end, we didn't get the commission because there was a new director, but it was an incredibly interesting process to completely erase anything you would like to do and only be completely technical and rational. And we did design all the tracks. That was very important as well. Outside, meanwhile, the garden has undergone a radical change of context, from luxurious rural country houses and palaces to inner city situations. City traffic and inhabitants interact with landscape on a daily basis, changing it from an enclosed private oasis to an open space that has become public. A shared garden for all people, a welcome relief from the defined urban living space. Yet the city park of today is no longer just an innocent piece of nature inside the urban context, made only for the distraction and health of the users and composed to introduce a building or to bring an ode to a monument of some kind. It has become an important political and strategic tool with which a city triggers extra sources of income, manipulates its voting inhabitants, and organizes its infrastructure. Sometimes hides polluted soil. A tool also to cover underground structures that need to stay accessible, or layers of polluted soil that may better be left untouched than transported elsewhere. This is the Milan competition for park design that we won in 2004, and we are now currently working on it since last year to analyze the situation and to adjust our design of that time. We worked as a team. I was invited to participate in this competition, and I invited Mirko Zardini, urban theoretician, Michael Molson, architect, Piet Oudolf, planting designer, Irma Boon, graphic designer, and Rodor, a landscape engineer. So we were a reasonably small team. I thought we would never win because we were in a team of really famous and very good landscape designers, and we had real enormous fun, but we won it. And that was a big responsibility and a very intriguing one, because all around this site, big developers are building huge buildings. And so the park design is really a tool to soothe all the emotions of the inhabitants all around, and have an enormous influence also on the elections and on the choice of mayor, etc. This is currently how the site looks. It's the building site for all the building going on around. And in the meantime, while the municipality used to be our client and still is officially, the developers are buying pieces and becoming powerful, and probably will be the ones who will contract us for the development of the design in the next phase. What we did was analyze and put together all the information. This is actually not the right drawing, but we took half a year to ask all the parties to give us all the information on what's going on. And underneath the soil, of course, there are train tunnels, metro, underground streets, and of course infrastructure and metro entrances and exits. And there are air ducts, air intakes, air exhausts, and lots and lots and lots and lots of stuff. So we found a very wonderful local landscape architect, Franco Giorgetta. It's the the wise man on the top left, and his daughter, and so on. And they are our local partners, and we are trying to. This is a model. This is a model I meant this afternoon, also talking to the students, to study the underground world and to decide how the topography should be organized to connect this park, which will become a sloping park, to all the buildings and plazas and roads that surround it. And so here you see the drawings we create with all the heights and different measurements, trying to keep the concept. The original concept is actually very simple. It's a bit like Ithaca when I look at the Cornell there. All the paths are just there to connect very essential points with one another. They are either physical areas or they are mental connections to places further away that are important for Milan. And by making these paths, you create irregular plots in between, and each plot has its own shape, but also will have its own garden. So we envision it to become a botanical garden, not plant by plant, but area by area, and the paths to become wide enough to be used for markets or fashion shows or art exhibitions or markets, etc. Each path can go up, down, become bridges or tunnels. Each plot can go up, down, and give views to the underground world or bridge certain critical moments. We work with developers and the city and anyone involved, also specialists in polluted grounds, economists over Arab that makes bridges, etc. And we're now developing a few particles already of that park, an initiative of the city with the developer, Manfredi Catella, to make a kind of announcement of the future by already doing a few of the plots. And this is the situation we work in. Inside Outside finds itself working with the inheritance of this development, in which contradictory ambitions and expectations, combined with requirements like linked to use, safety, technical and environmental restrictions, labor regulations, maintenance levels, available budgets, and local culture, ambitions, and traditions are setting the tone. So we also, although we would like to work only with plants, have to work in very urban conditions like sunken parking lots. This one that we designed in '97, I think, but has been realized only a year ago, or 2 years ago. Very much a concrete slab, as you can see, but it replaces walls that have to prevent water to flood the underground, because Holland is very wet, as you know. And so this is in Almere, which is very much a polder. And so instead of making a closed concrete bucket, which would be too expensive, and instead of making walls, we made this kind of crack, as if the floor cracks open because of the water pressure, and the plants and swamp trees grow through it. And of course the McCormick Tribune Campus Center, where we did the interiors and the gardens that slide in, envelop, bridge, light up the interior space, and also making curtains that reflects the nature. Fascinated and appalled by this obsession of complete control over the public realm as the most obvious consequence of Western politics today, we feel the urge to reintroduce a part of our cultural inheritance that we start to miss so much, namely the unique and exceptional qualities of the mysterious private garden and its immediate connection to the adjacent, as yet unrestricted interiors. In the past year, Inside Outside was lucky to be introduced as landscape designers for new development areas, the scale of which imply entirely new city parks. The plans we work on are mostly in parts of the world that are experiencing tremendous population and economic growth. In association with various architects, we are currently collaborating on projects in Hong Kong, Taiwan, Korea, and China, in Dubai, Ras Al Khaimah, Jebel Al Jaziz, Kuwait, and Qatar, In Syria and Libya, of course, completely on hold. In Latvia, completely on hold. Georgia, completely on hold. Denmark, Switzerland, Italy, Germany, and last but not least, in the Netherlands. In most of these projects, we formulate strategic landscape recipes for entire areas, introducing thick patches of planting that seem to cut through the hard surfaces of streets, sidewalks, plazas, and parking lots, and that are orchestrated in such a way that they organize the building plots, steer the traffic flow, temper the climatic conditions, and improve the local environment. This is in China. Oh, I have to go quicker because this is in Belgium, new prison gardens. You know that in the Netherlands and Belgium, prisoners get very much designed gardens. So this was a state competition we worked on with Belgian architects last year, and we didn't win it. They had to make 2 prison gardens. It was a huge team actually built up by the developer and the contractor. And it was a paid competition. For us, that was a real relief because usually you get nothing. It's a real investment by the designers. And we had two areas, a more urban one and a more landscape one, as you saw, more agricultural one. So the buildings were exactly the same, but the gardens became totally different. Yes, well, where was I? In all the projects, the planted landscape organizes the phases in which an area is developed, filling in and taking out, at the same time feeding the area through all phases with planting, pumping green into the new city throughout its development, creating streetscapes that envelop and open up, that mark areas and define borders through their materiality. Hong Kong. Doing environmental research to the project to help save water and electricity, to protect local plantings and animal species from extinction wherever and whenever we can. So this was with OMA, a new cultural district in Kowloon, opposite Hong Kong City. And OMA and Inside Outside, together with a very large team, McKinsey and Arab and lots of curators and artists and music lovers and makers and so on. Enormous built program on a slither of land. I'll go back to, or did I show you the site already? Let me see. This is the site. This is the site. And weirdly enough, if you are in Hong Kong, you know how intensely built it is. Every green is like an enormous, except the agriculture and aquaculture, but normally it's real forest, dense forest. And the climate is such, and maybe Houston is the same, that everything grows. And all of a sudden there's this slither of sandy coastline, because they built a tunnel, and so it's new land, it's sandy, and people use it, and there are many developments in Kowloon. They use it in different ways as parking lots or just as fields or to have a nice time. Fishing is very important. And we were inspired, of course, as you are as a visitor, by all these things happening in Hong Kong and around Hong Kong. And OMA developed actually 3 villages, and our landscape was like a continuous carpet that connected everything. And also that bridged everything, because there's underground structures, enormous underground structures. Here you see one of the drawings, the tunnels that go underneath. This is the existing infrastructure. And then let alone what OMA will do, because there will be roads connecting these villages, etc. And so this is again a model for us to see how we can organize the topography in such a way that you keep the flatness and the openness quite unique for Hong Kong. And to fill these particles in with different kinds of gardens, and of course a continuous forest for the shading, a bit based on the Feng Shui principle that this we could not say, because it's strategically not the right word, and trying to attract animals, which I always like to do, that there are some biotopes created in such a way that animals like to come there and make use of it, or come back, or will be protected. And of course, studying the whole tradition of theater and performance and public, and how you could use the garden and the outside space for cultural means, and trying to communicate what possibilities are there, and also trying to communicate that what is usually the case in China and Hong Kong, we would like to do the opposite. So you're allowed to do everything. And making sketches, trying to make things clear, bicycle routes, horse riding, children's farms, anything there, but of course also huge public plazas and ponds to fish in, but also water recycling, water cleaning, etc. Bridging the park to an older park, sunken areas for exhibitions, but also making the public and the people of Kowloon part of the garden, agriculture, flowers, fruits, inviting everyone in from all generations with all kinds of interests and hobbies. And one of the beauties of the site is that there is the sunset. And the sun sets, of course, on different moments through the year. So with OMA, we created lanes that are specially made for certain moments in the year, where the sun really sinks and everything is lit with its beautiful color and light. So it seems that in these projects we may introduce the entire scope of inside-outside's fascination, treating the public space outside as a series of interior rooms almost, with plant compositions in various degrees of control, from starkly trimmed carpets to voluptuous plant compositions, to totally wild patches of forest, and using street finishes that refer to interior floors of country houses and castles, or that integrate demolished building materials, if possible, and treating the interior space more and more as enclosed landscapes with a view, thus connecting and breaking open all that is urban, outside and within its walls and boundaries. All kinds of things. Being a designer in this era becomes increasingly complicated. This is a bit moralistic, maybe this is stupid, but anyway. I think the Dutch are a bit moralistic. Not only do we have responsibilities towards our clients, the architects we work with, the future users, and to our direct environment. Our work, in other words, does not only contribute to the agreeability of a place or space, but through their complex program and strategic organization also helps improve the architectural or urban quality, atmosphere and climate, contributing to sustainability and the well-being of our fellowmen, and to the cultural and physical value of a place in future. In our work as designers, thinkers and artists, we also urgently need to enhance our critical alertness to the political, social and economic implications of what we do. Thank you very much.
Take some questions?
Yes, questions by all means. Usually there are no questions. No, please, feel welcome.
I have a question. It's amazing to see the work. It's really, really extraordinary. And one of the things that I'm struck by is the idea that you are putting enormous pressure on architecture from both the inside and the outside. And I wonder if, one, you're interested in actually that part of it, or maybe it would be better for architecture to just get out of the way.
No, of course not. No, of course the tension is the essence of it all. But it has to be constructive tension.
No, hear you.
The tension is part of it, and you shouldn't take that away. It's a constructive, hopefully, tension. Don't you think?
Yeah, no, I do.
Architecture should definitely not go out of the way, then we have nothing to work with.
But the degree to which you do sort of exert your world on both sides, I find extraordinarily powerful, in fact. Mm-hmm. And I sometimes wonder if architecture could either, maybe it's still an open question to me, whether or not maybe architecture simply gets taken over by that, in a sense. I don't mean that as a criticism at all. Actually, I find it fascinating.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about it at dinner.
We've been encouraged to actually move the discussion outside for the book signing. So maybe we can take additional questions out front with it, so you can sign the books